It finally happened. The Democrats' House of Cards just collapsed, and the explosion came straight from inside of their own party. Chuck Schumer, of all people, the so-called strategist, just got exposed for masterminding the biggest political self-own in modern history. And after weeks of chest thumping about leverage and moral high ground, the reality hit hard. They had nothing. The shutdown that they swore was going to break President Trump, it completely backfired. And now the footage, the numbers, the votes, it's all out there. Chuck Schumer's own senators turned against him on live television, the chamber in chaos, aides whispering that his leadership is on life support. I mean, you could literally feel the panic echo through the Senate floor. So while the media begged Americans to blame Trump, the truth is crystal clear tonight. He won again. Trump outnegotiated them, outlasted them, and outplayed them. And the Democrats, they were so desperate for a headline, they gambled with America's paychecks and they lost. And so now the knives are out. Democrat operatives are leaking, donors are fleeing, progressive activists are demanding Chuck Schumer's resignation before sunrise. This is not a shutdown story, guys. This is the implosion of an entire political strategy and maybe even the end of Chuck Schumer's career as we know it. And so stay tuned, guys, because I'm going to break down exactly how Chuck Schumer's shutdown leverage turned into a live on-air surrender. This is Total Collapse. Schumer exposed after Dems lose the shutdown game. I want to get into it. Hit the like button and subscribe. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here's how it all started. So early October 2025, Washington slammed into a wall. The federal government officially shut down for the first time since President Trump's return back to the White House. Funding expired overnight, agencies locked their doors, and the usual suspects in the media screamed chaos. But behind the noise, this wasn't a budgeting mistake. This was a political gamble. Democrats thought that they had found Trump's weakness. They believed if you could just hold out long enough, delay paychecks, and stir enough public outrage that they could force him to cave on a set of spending demands, basically everything from healthcare subsidies to climate spending extensions, but they severely underestimated him. Again. So Trump stayed calm, confident, even smiling as reporters started shouting questions on the South Lawn. They'll come back to the table, he said, because the American people aren't buying it. Well, inside the Capitol, tempers flared. Staffers whispered that the shutdown was engineered leverage designed by Schumer's inner circle. Yet from day one, cracks started to show. Federal workers were angry, but they weren't angry at Trump. They were asking why Democrats were playing with their livelihoods and their paychecks. And this is when the illusion began to crumble. So Chuck Schumer, he sold his party on one idea: leverage. He told donors, progressive activists, even his fellow senators that shutting the government down would ultimately force Trump's hand. We have the moral upper ground, he said. If the lights go out in Washington, Trump will blink first. But that leverage was a mirage. You see, guys, behind closed doors, Democrat senators, they were already panicking. The issue that they chose, the healthcare subsidies for Obamacare, was politically radioactive. Average Americans, they weren't calling about subsidies. They were calling about the economy and groceries and taxes. Meanwhile, Trump's team flipped the script. They branded the standoff as Schumer's shutdown, and polling started turning against the Democrats within 48 hours. In fact, Chuck Schumer's gamble was supposed to make him look like a warrior from the middle class, but instead made him look like a gambler who had bet America's paycheck on a busted hand. Even CNN panels admitted the Democrats' leverage strategy had turned into political quicksand. And by week 2, Democrats were no longer talking about leverage. They were talking about escape routes. The pressure was building, the blame was shifting, and soon the mutiny would begin inside of their own ranks. Now, if you're nearing retirement, here's a hard truth. The rules have changed. 401ks rise and fall with the market. Pensions aren't what they used to be, and the dollar, it buys less and less every single year. So the question is simple. Who's really protecting your nest egg, you or the system? Well, this is why I partnered with Noble Gold Investments. They help real Americans take control of their retirement with real physical gold and silver. There's no pressure, no confusion, just education and options that make sense. Thousands are already calling Noble Gold at the phone number right there at the bottom of your screen at 877-646-5347, or they're visiting RonYatesGold.com to download their free wealth protection kit, because people aren't waiting for another crash to wake them up. They're acting before that happens. If your retirement means freedom, not fear, this is where you start. And so by the second week of the shutdown, the whispers became shouts. Inside the Democratic caucus, Chuck Schumer's grip on power was slipping. Senators who once backed him were now venting on background calls with reporters and saying words like directionless, tone deaf, and finished. Well, it wasn't just moderates, it was progressives too. In fact, the Bernie wing accused Chuck Schumer of selling them out. The centrists accused him of steering them into a political suicide, and the cameras caught what no spin doctor could hide. The look on Chuck Schumer's face during the late night session, exhausted, concerned, and visibly breaking. Even his allies like Senator Dick Durbin, they began creating distance, quietly telling colleagues that Chuck had overplayed his hand. A Democratic strategist told Axios he underestimated Trump's staying power. He thought the president would fold like the last time. Well, Trump didn't fold. In fact, he outlasted the noise, the media, the polling panic, everything. And so while Chuck Schumer scrambled to keep his caucus together, his own senators, they were plotting the exit. Now, this wasn't leadership anymore. This was survival. And by the time the cameras rolled for the final vote, Schumer's so-called strategy had turned into a televised humiliation. Then came the moment that shattered the illusion altogether completely. On a cold November night, as the Senate floor filled with reporters and tension thick enough to cut, the defections began. 8 Democrats broke rank. 8 guys crossing over to vote with Republicans to advance the funding resolution that Schumer swore he'd block at all costs. The room went silent as the board lit up 60-40. Gasps, texts flying, frozen staffers. Now, among the defectors, names like Tim Kaine, Jackie Rosen, Catherine Cortez Masto, these are people that Schumer once called loyal allies. And to make matters worse, his own minority whip, Dick Durbin, joined them. Now, when it was over, one Republican senator was overheard saying, "That's it, the Democrats just surrendered." And this is exactly how it looked. Schumer's face told the whole story. Tight jaw, eyes locked forward, trying to pretend like, it was all part of some bigger plan. But everybody in the chamber already knew better. The Democrats hadn't just lost a vote, they had lost the one thing that they claimed to hold: unity. And in that instant, Chuck Schumer's entire shutdown strategy collapsed before the entire nation. Now, let's talk about the so-called heart of the shutdown, shall we? The Obamacare premium tax credit fight. So this was supposed to be Schumer's moral high ground. His grand argument that the shutdown was about helping millions of Americans from losing healthcare coverage. He even went so far as to go to the Senate floor, trembling voice and all, claiming children with cancer would go untreated, seniors would face financial ruin, and the poor would be left behind. But that wasn't even the truth. In fact, it was a straight up lie. This was political theater. The ACA premium tax credit extension that they were demanding had nothing to do with emergency care or even cancer treatment. This was about reinstating subsidies for insurance companies, the billion-dollar insurance companies, guys. This is a move that Trump's team said was nothing more than a billion-dollar bailout for blue state insurers. Now, here's where it blew up in Chuck Schumer's face. Polling showed Americans weren't siding with him. They weren't calling their senators begging for subsidy reform. They were calling their senators asking why their paychecks were being held hostage over a policy fight that they didn't even understand. Now, Chuck Schumer, he misread the battlefield completely. And that miscalculation right there, it set the stage for his greatest defeat yet. Now, real confidence comes from knowing, not guessing. Yet, most retirees are guessing about their Medicare coverage. This is why I partnered with Chapter. They review your Medicare plan until there's nothing left to question. Now, one of our viewers, she said, Chapter turned my uncertainty into confidence. So let me ask, are you still guessing or are you joining the confident majority? Now, most people are already dialing the phone number down below, or they're visiting askchapter.org/Ron. That phone number begins 909-563-8279. And of course, I got to share this amazing comment from Lenora Hand. She said, "Ron, I called Chapter and they are saving us $2,400 for 2026. Thank you. Blessings, Lenora, Texas." Well, Lenora, thank you so much for sharing the good news with me. And hopefully more of you guys will share more good news with me because I just love hearing about it. Now, this is where it all came crashing down. The Democrats' entire playbook hinged on one illusion: leverage. They thought that shutting down the government was going to put President Trump in a chokehold, but instead, it only proved just how little control that they actually had. Now, Trump refused to blink. He kept the message very simple: the American people shouldn't suffer because Democrats want to play politics. And that line right there, guys, that line hit home. Because meanwhile, reports surfaced that Democratic staffers were privately calling the shutdown a messaging disaster. The word leverage that once echoed through every talking point, well, it was now being scrubbed from their press releases. The collapse came fast. Democrats realized they couldn't outlast Trump. The longer the shutdown dragged on, the more it hurt them. The more it hurt them in the polls, in public sentiment, even among their donors. And then Schumer folded. Just like that, the man who vowed to hold the line walked into Mitch McConnell's office and signed off on the very same bill that he had rejected days earlier. He didn't just lose leverage, he lost credibility. And from that moment, the Democrat strategy officially died. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this wasn't just a legislative loss. This was a brand collapse. Now, for years, Democrats built their identity on being the party of the people, so they say, right? But the shutdown right here straight up stripped that mask clean off their faces. So what Americans saw wasn't compassion, it was chaos. They saw a party that weaponized paychecks and welfare benefits just to score a few political points. And they still failed. The fallout was immediate. Democrat voters felt betrayed. Activists who once worshipped Schumer called him a sellout. Progressive influencers lit up X, formerly known as Twitter, with hashtags like hashtag Schumer resign and hashtag leverage lies. Even MSNBC panels couldn't spin it. Like, one analyst admitted live on air that the shutdown backfired catastrophically. Meanwhile, President Trump's approval rating among independents jumped 7 points in a single week, guys. The narrative completely flipped. Trump stayed strong while Democrats cracked under pressure. Behind closed doors, party strategists were panicking, fundraising slowed, pollsters warned of deep disillusionment among base voters. Donors whispered that Schumer's credibility was beyond repair. Now, just like that, Democrats' so-called moral high ground crumbled into dust. The party that promised to fight for working class families, they had become the one that was hurting them the most. And then, of course, came the broadcast. This is the moment that millions of Americans witnessed the meltdown in real time. Cameras zoomed in on the Senate floor as the vote tally hit the screen. 60 votes to reopen the government, 40 against. Schumer sat stone-faced, hands clasped, pretending that it was business as usual, but you could see it in his eyes. He already knew it was over. Networks like CNN and ABC, they tried to spin it as a temporary compromise, but by midnight, the truth had already gone viral. Clips flooded social media showing Democrats yelling behind closed doors, staffers sprinting through the halls, and Schumer dodging reporters with that 1,000-yard stare. The internet dubbed it the Senate surrender. Conservative commentators compared it to a live televised implosion. Even some left-wing news outlets quietly admitted that this was a strategic catastrophe. And then Fox News dropped the headline that echoed across the country: Schumer loses shutdown gamble as Democrats revolt. By dawn, the damage was irreversible. I mean, the spectacle had gone completely global, and Schumer's name had become synonymous with failure. Democrats' panic wasn't hidden behind the scenes anymore. This was right there. It was in high definition for all of America to see. And so now I want to talk about the flip side. I want to talk about the winners of this shutdown war. So while Democrats were imploding, President Donald J. Trump stood unshaken. He didn't retreat. He didn't negotiate from weakness. He didn't buy into the media's hysteria. He simply waited, and once again, his patience paid off. For weeks, the mainstream news outlets painted him as reckless, uncompromising, even dangerous. But when the dust cleared, Trump looked like the only adult in the room. He called it exactly what it was: a Democrat-manufactured crisis meant to squeeze taxpayers for partisan gain. And the American people saw it. Polling shows a surge in support for President Trump's economic handling and his stand-your-ground leadership style. Even moderate Democrats admitted privately that he played it perfectly. Republicans, once worried the shutdown would backfire, they're now united behind the president's approach. The GOP walked away stronger with leverage in the House, higher morale in the Senate, and a crystal clear talking point: Trump protects paychecks. Democrats play politics. Now, this wasn't just a policy victory. This was a defining moment, a reminder that strength wins, weakness loses, and Donald Trump still knows how to command the battlefield. And so the big question now is, well, what happens next, Ron? Well, behind closed doors, the knives are out. Democratic donors are furious, progressives are calling for a leadership purge, and whispers are growing louder and louder that Chuck Schumer's time as Senate Minority Leader could be coming to an end. Now, reports out of Washington, D.C. are saying internal meetings have turned ugly, with young senators demanding new blood and questioning why Schumer led them into a shutdown with no backup plan. One insider told Politico Chuck's era is ending. Everyone knows it. And as Democrats turn on each other, Trump's team is already moving forward, announcing plans for a new spending framework focused on border security, tax relief, and restoring confidence in American workers. The contrast couldn't be any clearer. A party in power that's unified versus a party in collapse that can't even unify behind its own leader. The message to the nation is simple. The leverage is gone, the illusion has shattered, and the Democrat Party's arrogance has finally caught up to them. This isn't just the end of a shutdown. It is the end of Chuck Schumer's credibility, and for Trump, it's another win for the history books. And well, that's the story, folks. Schumer's shutdown gamble didn't just fail, it detonated inside of his own party. Trump stood strong, Trump stood firm, the Democrats collapsed, and now the question isn't whether Schumer can recover, it's who replaces him when the dust settles. Now, if you're proud to see leadership that doesn't bend under pressure, hit the like button and share this video and drop a comment down below. Was this the end of Schumer's political career, or was it just the beginning of the Democrat civil war? You already know how I feel. Anyway, guys, this was the total collapse. Schumer exposed after Dems lose the shutdown game. Like, subscribe. I'll see you next time.